Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music.
Marriage is promising each other to be in love and to make love with only each other until death do us part. Millions of people want to get married. So I speak now to you. If you're a woman and a man, if you are two women, or if you are two men wanting to marry each other. And here are many questions for you to think about deeply and talk about with each other before you get married. Do you both want kids? If only one of you wants to have kids, what then? If both of you want kids, how many? Do you agree on how to raise your kids? If any of your kids come out gay, lesbian, bisexual, or trans, will you both be fully accepting? How differently were you both raised by your parents? Are you both opposed to hitting and cursing kids? If one of you is not religious, will you raise your kids to be religious or not? Are you both religious? The same religion? If you're in different religions, how will you decide which religion for your kids? Do you both know and feel loved by each other's families? When you wrong each other, do you apologize? Do you forgive? Many couples fight like crazy over money and bills. Does one of you enjoy living simply? Does the other want to buy crap nobody needs? If so, do you want a bank account together, or do you want to have separate accounts? Do you want to live in a small place or in a mansion? Do you want to live in a low-income community with people of every color, or in an upper-income community of mostly white people? Does one of you need and want much more peace and quiet than the other? Much of the time, no TV, no radio blaring, no music. Do you each stay up late or get up early? Do you both enjoy many visits from friends? Or is one of you much more neat, wanting the house to always look picture perfect? Does the other want the house to feel relaxed and lived in? Does one of you eat only healthy food? The other mostly junk food? Do either of you drink booze or use other drugs? Are you truthful with each other? Do you always speak the truth to each other? No bullshit, no lies, no cover up. Do you lie about anything to each other? Are you open about your past relationships? Are either of you emotionally constipated and hard to open up, to show feelings of sadness or joy? Do you each have long-time close friends? Are both of you or one of you committed to living fairly in our world family of approaching 8 billion people? As of now, are you both strongly attracted sexually to each other? And if sex is not important to both of you now, what if someday that changes for one of you? My dear friend Tom, who died years ago, was a preacher, married a woman. Years later, after marriage to his wife, Tom realized his strong attraction to certain men. He and his wife stayed together, but sadly, she never fully accepted his sex with men. My friend Beverly knew before she married Frank that he was attracted to men. And that made it much better for both Beverly and Frank. But often one partner has not realized or accepted his or her attraction for persons of the same gender before they get married to someone of the other gender. If either of you see or meet somebody you feel sexually attracted to, do you feel free to tell each other? Even if you do not have sex with that person you saw or met? Are you much more sexually attracted to other persons than you are to your partner? Do both of you enjoy cuddling, snuggling together, naked and sober? Are you or is your partner repressing big parts of who you are or your partner is in order to stay together? Can you argue vigorously and still feel deeply connected, still love each other deeply? Do you realize you each have very mixed feelings about each other and your relationship? All of us have mixed feelings about many things. If either of you is starving sexually, are you turning to booze? If either of you is starving sexually, are you turning to gambling or hogging out on junk food to try to fill that cavity, that yearning for passionate sex and romance? If either of you is starving sexually, are you fighting over stupid things, becoming workaholics? Have you each faced and gotten rid of the shame and guilt about sex and about being naked with each other with the lights on? Have you each faced and gotten rid of the shame and guilt you may have been taught as children about being naked and about sex. Living together, married under the same roof, destroys many friendships, harms many friendships. It might be wise for you to live together 6 months or more before you legally get married to see how well this might work or not work. Are either or both of you making big changes in how and how much you travel, how much you spend, how much you consume, how much you pollute to slow your part in the damn climate crisis that is threatening all people on earth? What about your politics? Nearly the same or very different? Where do you each stand on racism, on white supremacy, justice, police brutality, U.S. wars? Before making a solemn vow to being romantic with only each other until one of you dies, try living together under the same roof for 6 months or a year to see how your relationship works. Is either of you very insecure, very jealous? Do you prefer to sleep in the same bed or in separate beds? If someday you separate, do you each refuse to blame it all on the other person? Do you each refuse to speak about the other person as a devil if you separate? How do you talk about your former girlfriends or boyfriends now to each other or to your family or to other friends? Is there anything about yourself you're afraid to tell your partner and that you do your damnedest to hide, thinking the partner will freak out and walk away? Is there any question you're afraid to ask your partner about his or her past life, their past relationships, their beliefs, their feelings? Do you both enjoy warmly hugging each other when alone or in public? If not, why not? Is passionate sex very important for one or for both of you? How often? Once a day, once a week, once a month? If very important for only one of you, where does that leave your romantic relationship? If you both treasure passionate sex, do you tell each other exactly what turns you on and what turns you off in making love? Can you imagine a peaceful separation from this person someday? Or a very bitter fight in divorce court? If either of you becomes severely disabled with dementia or some other serious disease, no longer capable of sex, do you give your partner permission to have sex with someone else? Do either of you hold grudges against each other or against anybody? I treasure passionate romance with men. I treasure hot, affectionate sex with a healthy man who has no shame, no guilt about sex with men. A man I'm attracted to and who's attracted to me. But I do not want to marry any man, no matter how much I'm in love with him, no matter how strongly attracted I am to him. I can be openly and deeply in love with more than one man at the same time. So I would feel trapped. I would feel caged. I would feel suffocating in a marriage to just one man. I refuse to make this promise of marriage that I would later regret. I aim to tell the truth. I aim not to make foolish promises that I would want to break. My father's parents, my grandparents, Lloyd and Anna Schrader, worked hard as farmers for many years. They suffered sicknesses and the Great Depression. And even after retiring, they had a big garden. They ran a small restaurant most Tuesdays at my parents' livestock auction market. My grandma greatly enjoyed cooking and seeing many people, including me at the time, eat her delicious food. Some folks came for miles to eat at their small restaurant. Back then, I was still addicted to sugar, meat, cooked food. My grandma had never learned what I have learned about health my past 47 years from hundreds of articles, conversations, books, speakers, videos, and my own experiences. My grandpa washed the dishes at the restaurant. The last years of his life, he and I kissed each other on our lips. As far as I know, I was the only adult male he kissed on the lips. My grandma also was affectionate to me. I wish now I had spent more time with them. Learn from my mistake. I wish I had spent more time with my grandparents. They both were good to me. And I dedicate this program tonight to Grandpa and Grandma Schrader. Tragically, a severely abused 18-year-old white man murdered my grandpa and grandma as they slept in bed on June 25th, 1976. I was 30 years old. Grandpa was 85. Grandma was 82. In the Bible, the Apostle Paul wrote, "Let your women keep silence in the churches, for it is not permitted unto them to speak, but they are commanded to be under obedience." He also wrote, "Let the woman learn in silence with all subjection." Paul wrote, "I do not allow a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence." Talk about the Taliban in Afghanistan today refusing to respect equal human rights for women. Millions of Christians, past and present, in the United States and around the world, believe the Bible is the inspired Word of God. The Bible, sadly, insanely, puts women below men in many verses, hundreds of verses. If I were a woman, how would I feel? As a man, I support full, equal rights for women. I damn the Bible's many verses putting down women below men. In the Bible, the Apostle Paul wrote, "Servants, obey your masters in all things." He wrote, "Please your masters well in all things. Be obedient to your masters with fear and trembling." The Apostle Peter in the Bible wrote, "Servants, be subject to your masters with all fear." Sadly, the Bible never says, never once says, slavery is always evil. Many white masters in the South who bought, sold, and owned enslaved black people were faithful church members. They believed God did not damn slavery. The Bible says, "Servants, obey your masters in all things." So if the white master beats your black mama for learning to read, if the white master rapes your black sister, obey in all things your masters. What would black women like Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth say about those awful Bible verses supporting slavery? Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth, who risked their lives to take enslaved black people to freedom. What would they say about this evil garbage in the Bible? In the Bible, the Apostle Paul wrote, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God." Were the Roman emperors who threw Christians to the lions ordained of God? Insanity. Were the Nazis that mass murdered millions of Jews, gypsies, gay men, communists, handicapped people ordained of God? Was Stalin ordained of God? Was Hitler ordained of God? Was the U.S. government that stole the homelands and mass murdered many thousands of Native Americans ordained of God? Was the U.S. government that has murdered millions in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and dozens of other nations under both Republican and Democrat presidents, was the U.S. the mass murderer of millions ordained of God? Absolutely evil bullshit in the Bible. Millions of U.S. Christians say the Bible is the inspired, infallible Word of God. In the Bible, Jesus called God Father dozens of times. Jesus said, "Your heavenly Father feeds the birds. Are you not of more value than the birds?" So when two nations are mass murdering each other in war, are both governments ordained of God? And when Jesus said, "Your heavenly Father feeds the birds, are you not of more value than those birds?" So Jesus is saying we can trust God to feed us. Think of the millions of people all over the world for thousands of years, people of all ages, from infants to 100 years old or more, who have starved to death, many of them begging God for help. If Jesus said those words, he was severely out of touch with reality. He was deluded to the max. False advertising for God. Jesus said, "Not one sparrow will fall to the ground without your Father's will. You are of more value than many sparrows." Are the many atrocities suffered by millions throughout history according to God the Father's will? Sadly, as a sincere young Christian preacher 56 years ago, when I was 20, I'm 76 now, I did not question deeply this poison crap. Jesus said, "If you then who are evil know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him?" Sadly, false advertising for God. I swallowed it. I taught it. I preached it. But I thank many people who helped me open my eyes. It was a long, long journey to freedom from religion. I wish we had a loving, fair, all-powerful parent God who helped all people, who prayed for help. But all the wishing in this world does not make it true. If God did not hear and help millions in the Nazi concentration camps and those going into the gas chambers, why would I expect God to hear and to help me? And some U.S. Christians driving their fancy cars pray for God to help them find a parking space. Insanity. Many military veterans never admit to themselves or to others that they were conned by their governments to become soldiers. And many people of whatever religion, not just Christianity, whatever religion, never admit to themselves or to others they were conned, usually as children, to become addicted to religion. In South Africa, after many years of bloody, cruel, white supremacy under apartheid against blacks, Many meetings for truth and reconciliation took place across the whole nation of South Africa for speaking truths about the white people's tortures and murders of black people for many years. And these meetings were to bring whites and blacks together as equals and as neighbors to stop the white evils toward blacks. And if the white police confessed honestly, openly, the evils they had committed against blacks, these white cops could avoid prosecution and punishment in prison. Here is the story of one elderly black South African woman who had suffered terrible losses at the hands of a brutal white murderer cop under the racist white supremacy. And this elderly black South African woman stood in an emotionally charged courtroom listening to a group of white police officers confess the atrocities they had perpetrated in the name of apartheid. Officer Vanderbroek acknowledged, he admitted, he confessed his personal responsibility in the death of this woman's son. And along with others, this Vanderbroek shot her 18-year-old son at point-blank range. The group partied while they burned his body, turning it over and over on the fire until it was completely reduced to ashes. 8 years later, Vanderbroek and others arrived to collect her husband. A few years later, shortly after midnight, Vanderbroek again appeared and took the woman to a place beside a river. And on a wood pile, her husband lay bound. And they forced her to watch as they poured gasoline over his body and ignited the flames that consumed this black woman's husband's body. And the last words she heard him say were, "Forgive them." And now Vanderbroek stood before her awaiting judgment. Vengeance seemed inevitable. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission officers asked this woman what she wanted. She said, "I want 3 things. I want Mr. Vanderbroek to take me to the place where they burned my husband's body. I would like to gather up the dust and give him a decent burial. And second," the woman said, "Mr. Vanderbroek took all my family away from me, and I still have a lot of love to give. Twice a month, I would like for him to come to the ghetto and spend a day with me so I can be a mother to him. And third, I would like Mr. Vanderbroek to know that he's forgiven by God and that I forgive him too. And I would like someone to come and lead me by the hand to where Mr. Vanderbrook is so that I can embrace him, so that I can hug him, and he can know my forgiveness is real. And as they led this elderly woman across the silent courtroom, Vanderbrook fainted. He was overwhelmed. And in the courtroom, someone began singing Amazing Grace. And gradually others joined in until finally everyone there was singing Amazing Grace. John Newton wrote those words of Amazing Grace. John Newton was a brutal white slave trader, guilty of the kidnapping, the torture, the murder of many black people from Africa as he brought them across the ocean to be enslaved. But John Newton changed. John Newton worked to abolish slavery of black people. And he wrote Amazing Grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. I no longer believe in God, but I know with much help from each other, we can wake up, we can change, we can turn from our evil ways, and we can forgive our enemies, and we can forgive ourselves. I moved to Albuquerque in June 1970, over 52 years ago. I strongly oppose all war. I refused to go to Vietnam to mass murder those people in the Vietnam War. So I was allowed to do 2 years of community service, non-military, first in Arizona, then here in Albuquerque. That's how I came to Albuquerque. And some young people who may have damned war as much as I did, sadly, did not know about doing community service instead of becoming U.S. soldiers to kill and to die. In the early 1970s, I met my dear friend Martina Tafoya, who lived here in Martineztown of Albuquerque. She enjoyed my taking her and her young nephew, Johnny Argon, who now is one of my very close friends. But back there in the 70s, taking her and young Johnny, about 9 or 10 years old, to the guitar mass many times at San Felipe Church in Old Town. I sang in the choir there. I drove my 61 Dodge, the only car I have ever owned in my life. And Martina said, if I have anything to say to anybody, I tell them to their face. And that's usually a great way to live instead of being two-faced. Martina told me to bring over to her home anyone my heart desired. Martina enjoyed preparing a meal for guests, even though it took her a long time because she walked slow from disability. One day when I visited her, 3 men came together into her house. And one of them lived right next door and worked at the city jail. One of the other 2 pulled out a gun on me. Now, I don't know if it was loaded, and I sure as hell did not want to find out. Apparently, these 3 men thought that I, as a young white man, was somehow taking advantage of this Chicana, older woman. The man with the gun took off my glasses and my vest. He asked me, "Why are you acting so calm?" And I was not calm inside, but I guess I was a good actor at the moment. Martina became very nervous. I was her friend, and these men were harassing me, threatening me in her home. She threw down her sugar bowl. She went up to the wall, started pounding her head against the wall. She could have had a stroke or a heart attack. Finally, those 3 men left. I did not report this to the police. I did not want revenge from the men, to be shot in my head or have a tire shot out on my car as I was driving through Martinez Town. For weeks afterward, when I came to pick Martina up, I parked on the street. I did not pull in her driveway, so there'd be less chance of her next door neighbor seeing me and giving me a hard time again. But one Sunday, I decided to drive in her driveway quicker because Martina walked slow and I could pull my car close to her door. And her neighbor man, one of those 3 men who had threatened me months or weeks before, he came out. And I feared what he was going to say or do. But he said, "When you go to Mass today, pray for me." It was his way of apologizing to Martina and to me. And months later, when I ran for city council, and I lost, I came in number 9 out of 13, Martina told me that neighbor man had voted for me. And maybe that was the only time in Albuquerque's history when someone running for city office received a vote from someone who had before been in a group harassing and threatening the person, and that voter had later apologized. We human beings can wake up. We can change our foolish ways, our stupid ways, our evil ways, with much help from other people. For the rest of my life, whether I die tomorrow or 30 years from now, I aim never to own a car. I aim never to live in a much larger space than my 114 square foot, one-room home now. I want always to live below the U.S. poverty level and below the U.S. federal income taxable level. I refuse to pay federal income tax for U.S. mass murder in many nations. I refuse to pay federal income tax for U.S. nuclear bombs, endangering the lives of hundreds of millions of people. Why would I want much more than I need while many millions worldwide suffer hunger, cold, sickness, with no home? I want always to dance to beautiful, heart-touching music if I am physically able. I want to keep making new friends, a great variety of friends, while I treasure my old friends, both living and dead. I want to keep my eyes and my heart open to possibly new lovers. I treasure heart-to-heart conversations. The more deep and real and personal, the better. I love personal questions. I want to forgive myself and others. I want to ask forgiveness when I wrong others. I need and I want many hugs with men and women of all ages, of all colors. Anybody who sincerely wants for us to hug. I love to sunbathe naked most days in cool weather, not when it's blazing hot. I enjoy gardening to grow food and flowers. I aim to eat only healthy, raw plant foods until I die, or if I can no longer get them. I want always to speak out publicly against white supremacy, against all injustice, against war, until my last breath. I want sex with healthy men I'm strongly attracted to and who are attracted to me. I want intimate pleasure with men not ashamed to be seen with me in public. I aim to flirt only with men I am strongly sexually attracted to. I aim to flirt only with men I am quite sure can accept my interest without getting mean and crazy, even if their response is no, thank you. Will the day come when every man can accept another man's sexual attraction as a compliment, even if his response is no, thank you? Many men who get mad and crazy now when another man shows sexual interest in them may someday, in old age, be glad women or men would find them sexually attractive, even if they choose not to accept the offer for sex. I appreciate sexual compliments, even if I'm not attracted to the person, even if I do not have sex with the person, I appreciate the compliment. I aim to say no when I mean no. I aim to say yes when I mean yes. I aim to respect a man's right to turn me down sexually with no begging, no forcing, no pouting, no chasing. My strong attraction for him in no way guarantees his attraction for me. Nights of hot sex with a man are not enough to make us live well together under one roof. I saw my mother and my dad both suffer the hell of sickness for over 30 years. I woke up. I changed to eating and living healthy. I heard my mother and my dad many times fight over money and bills, so I eventually learned to enjoy living simply below the U.S. poverty level. They and I, back then, craved and bought much stuff we did not need. My mother's passion for fairness and how she loved to give to other people, all of this taught me to enjoy living simply below the U.S. poverty level. Seeing my mother and dad both suffer in their miserable marriage, I avoided the cage of marriage to anyone. Yes to close friendships, yes to passionate romance, but marriage for me? Hell no. Never, never, never. My mother demanded honesty. She hated lies. My mother hated bullshit. My mother was honest and open with me about everything. She would have been terribly hurt if I had lied to her about anything. Maybe more hurt than if I had slapped her face. Of course, she did not want a lie or a slap. I see now that my coming out publicly as a gay man came partly from her passion for truth. Why should I live a lie? My coming out as no longer religious also came partly from my mother's passion for truth. How can I pretend to believe what I no longer believe? 56 years ago, I was a very sincere Christian preacher, but many people on my long journey from religion taught me to question deeply my faith and the Bible. My mother yearned to live simply. My mother yearned to live healthy. My mother yearned to live free from marriage to my dad. I wish they had parted peacefully, but they stayed together 48 years until my mother died. Miserable cellmates until death in the prison of marriage. They might have been good friends if they had never married. If I lived to be my dad's age of 81 when he died, I hope I am as devoted to my work as he was to his work. In the 1980s, Harold Washington was the first black mayor of Chicago. He was a progressive, and many people loved Harold Washington. Many people respected this first black mayor of Chicago. Harold Washington supported the rights of gay people. He died in office while he was mayor. What he ate made him fat and killed him. Otherwise, Harold Washington might have lived many more years. He might have made many more good changes as mayor in Chicago. Booze, cigarettes, and junk food kill far more lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans people than the hate-filled people who murder LGBT people. Booze, cigarettes, junk food kill far more black and brown people than the hate-filled white supremacists who murder black and brown people. I drink no booze, I smoke no cigarettes, I eat no junk food. Why pay those filthy rich companies, those lying, killing companies, to make me sick, to kill me? Why should we make them filthy rich as they addict us to their poisons? Why commit slow suicide? Some religious people say when someone dies, God took him. I'm no longer religious, but even if you believe in God, do you believe God caused someone to drive drunk, to crash and die on that day? Do you believe God caused a long-time heavy smoker to die of lung cancer on that day? Do you believe God caused someone who hogged out on junk food for years to die of cancer, diabetes, or heart attack on that day? If I jump off the tallest building in town, should my friends say, God took him? Many people use God took him to escape taking responsibility, to wake up, and to change our ways. They use God as a cop-out, as if they can blame the day of their death on God, who causes the person to die on that day. Crazy stupidity. Bullshit. And a toast to your health, my fresh piss that I have drunk every day since November 10th, 1999. Good night.
Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you high, and when it's said and done, you'll know the sun will shine on. And when it's said